Welcome, my Disney guests. I was watching an episode of Provost Park Pass. Check out their channel, but be prepared for the puns. They are great, even if they are plentiful. Chris was talking about the coat of arms on Sleeping Beauty's castle. Now, many people, including myself, thought that this was the Disney family coat of arms, but it's not. And I was really excited to find out about this because I love to learn new things about my favorite Disney park. So on learning that information, I decided to do some research on Crest's coat of arms and heraldry and what the different elements of crests mean. Now, I found a website that has pictures of all these different coat of arms, but as they are copyrighted, I can't share them with you. But you can look them up. You look up the different crests on houseofnames.com. Now, I looked up the Disney coat of arms, and it does look very similar to the one that's on the castle. There are differences. The shield on the castle is shaped in the classic style, curved at the bottom and comes to a point. Whereas the Disney coat of arms is more of an elongated square. I say that because it doesn't seem long enough to be considered a rectangle. And instead of the lions, there are 3 fleur-de-lis in the border horizontal through the middle of the shield. Interestingly enough, the Latin quote for the Disney family crest is "Vincit qui patur," which means "He conquers who endures." And I feel this is entirely appropriate for Walt Disney. Now, this is where things get even more interesting. I'm a big fan of Arthurian lore, and I decided to look up the Pendragon coat of arms. It is almost identical to the Disney coat of arms. The 2 main differences is that above the knight's helmet, the Disney coat of arms has a lion. This is also on the Sleeping Beauty castle coat of arms, whereas the Pendragon coat of arms has another knight's helmet. The Pendragon coat of arms also has 3 fleur-de-lis on it as well, but they are in a chevron through the middle of the shield. The Sleeping Beauty castle coat of arms has lions instead of fleur-de-lis. I just like saying that, fleur-de-lis. There is a lion above the knight's helmet and 3 stacked lions on the shield. Now, Walt Disney had the coat of arms designed for the Sleeping Beauty castle. So I would like to believe that with all the fairy tales he had movies made of, he either knew or researched what the different symbols mean. So the 2 main symbols of the Sleeping Beauty castle coat of arms are gold, which means generosity and elevation of the mind, and the lions, which is dauntless courage. The coat of arms is also on Cinderella's castle in the Magic Kingdom in Disney World. So it's not a coat of arms that's made for Philip and Aurora, for just them. Unfortunately, the true meaning of the symbols would have been lost when Walt Disney passed away in 1966. So I don't know if this crest was to be used on all of his parks or what. You may be wondering why I use the Pendragon crest to compare the other 2. Well, when you walk across the drawbridge of Sleeping Beauty's castle, you are walking straight towards King Arthur's carousel. This carousel has been in Disneyland from the very beginning. And knowing how Walt started the idea of Disneyland, was sitting on a bench watching his daughters ride a carousel in the park, it all blends together so much that I can't call this a coincidence. I also looked up the difference between a merry-go-round and a carousel, besides the fact that carousel sounds a little more classy. Most people think that these 2 rides rotate in opposite directions. This isn't true. But European carousels typically turn clockwise because they were intended for cavalry practice, so that the knights or soldiers would be able to hold the sword in their right hand. Now, King Arthur's carousel in Disneyland does turn clockwise, but I don't think they would approve of sword practice on it. But it could be fun. And if you weren't aware, all the horses on King Arthur's carousel have names. You can stop at City Hall on Main Street and get a copy of all their names. And there is a lead horse, even though it's circular, a lead horse on King Arthur carousel, and her name is Jingles because there are jingle bells on her harness. In 2008, Jingles was given a luxurious makeover and accented with gold leaf paint. Jingles was themed for Mary Poppins and dedicated to Julie Andrews. If you get a chance to look closer, you will see an image of flying Mary Poppins, her umbrella, and the initials JA for Julie Andrews on the saddle blanket. There's also a hidden Mickey to be found made of 3 jewels. Now these photos were borrowed from the website micechat.com. This is a great place to stay up to date on Disney news and information. And finally, in the last link to the story of Crests, carousels, their horses, we jump to the movie The Sword in the Stone. This was released 3 years before Walt's passing. So this is why I feel all this is connected. There is a sword in the stone anvil next to King Arthur's carousel. In the earlier years, when the sword was added, there was a show featuring Merlin, who came out complete with royal brass band and announced that King Arthur was taking a royal day off and that they needed to find a substitute king or queen. Someone from the band would chime in. Merlin announced that the job was so difficult that they would need to be king or queen for the afternoon and not for the entire day. That way they could perform the show a second time during the day. Merlin would make many statements and jokes on how to find the king or queen, and usually 3 people were called up to try and pull the sword from the stone. Usually they would get a guy from the audience who looked big and strong as one of the applicants, but of the 3, one was always a child. And the child was always the one who was successful. I really miss that show, and I wish they would bring it back. But back in January 2020, something unprecedented happened with the sword. A man, only identified as Sam, pulled the sword completely out of the stone, anvil. It was his first time in Disneyland, and he was told that if he pulled the sword, he'd win a prize. Well, I guess brute force did the trick, and he removed it completely, to the shock of cast members nearby. The sword was never meant to be removed completely, as it only raises several inches. The sword looked broken and jagged when it was completely removed. The cast members taped the area off so no one would get hurt, and it was repaired within a few days. But I just hope that it wasn't damaged beyond being able to be used for the show if they decide to bring it back. I found all of this so fascinating. Information about the crest on Sleeping Beauty's castle led me to Disney's family crest, to Arthur Pendragon's crest, to King Arthur's carousel, to Mary Poppins' horse on the carousel, and finally to the sword in the stone anvil. This is one of the amazing things that I love about Walt Disney and his amazing park. You may think that all things are individual stories, events, or attractions, but you just might find out that things are a little more connected than you realize, thereby creating a world of magic and wonder. This is why I admire Walt Disney as much as I do, and why I will always say, thanks for the magic, Walt.